Well, welcome to the show. This is Renee Reports, and I'm your host, Renee Ricchetti. Thank you for joining us tonight. As you know, the 2021 general election is over, and the ballots are being counted. Officials at King County Elections continue to do their job. I did head out to the election night parties. I hit up Lorena Gonzalez, who's running for mayor, and also Nicole Thomas Kennedy, who's running for um, city attorney. And I'll bring you that exclusive coverage later. But first, I wanted to let you know that we do have a very sad topic to discuss later in the show. And I'm bringing on Oliver Webb, the board chair of the Diversity Alliance of Puget Sound, to discuss that. We have had a second murder of a trans or non-binary individual here in Washington State, um, and this is the fifth year in the Pacific Northwest this year alone. So he'll be discussing that. But first, I wanted to welcome our panel of experts on this episode of Renee Reports um, to fill us in on and provide us some input and some insight, as well as clarity on the outcome of the elections. Let me bring in Devin Glazer. Hey, Devin, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to be inside on this cold and rainy night.
Yes, definitely. Um, so I wanted to introduce you. Devin Glazer is the co-founder and executive director of Upgrade Seattle, a grassroots advocacy organization dedicated towards the creation of a public internet utility here in Seattle. He is a lawyer, writer, and activist whose work has been appeared in Crosscut, The Stranger, and soon the Georgetown Law Technology Review.
And the CLG News, if we really want to go way back.
Oh, definitely. He was a contributing writer to the Seattle Good News many years ago when I was the managing editor. Devin is motivated by a strong belief that we're all better off when we pool our resources for the public good, and has never met a monopoly he hasn't attempted to take down. That always makes me laugh. Let me bring in MK Scott, a good friend of mine. Let's see, MK. Well, while he's funneling in, let me introduce him. He is the publisher and editor-in-chief of Unite Seattle magazine. It's the region's first LGBTQ and allied quarterly news magazine. Unite has profiled many local politicians, from Mayor Durkin, Congressman Camilla Jayapal, and Governor Jay Inslee. Last spring, he gave me, Renee, the opportunity to interview Dr. Anthony Fauci for the cover story. What can I say? Um, Now, it looks like MK is having a little bit of trouble connecting.
This is why we need a public internet utility. God,
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up.
it's not
100%.
hard to find segues because what we have now sucks.
It really does. Yeah. And, the mesh network is a great idea, but, it's just a little bit here and a little bit there, and it's not everywhere. And that's where it needs to be in the city of Seattle.
At the end of the
Uh,
day, you want to wire to everyone's home, right? I mean, that's how we get electricity. It's how we have water in a tube, right? We could do internet.
Absolutely. If we can do power, we can do sewer. We definitely can do public utility internet. So maybe MK, you could drop off and then reconnect. Maybe that would help. While that is happening, let's go ahead and start with you, Devin. Now, obviously, you are a LGBT community member,
Mm-hmm.
LGBTQ plus, excuse me. Um, Now, what should we make as the LGBT community about the outcome of the results so far?
I mean, one, just because it's a Washington and Seattle election, we should know that the results aren't done yet. We'll find out probably a lot more tomorrow, and then they'll keep trickling in over the next few days and maybe even weeks. But the initial results are, um, the conservative candidates in every race basically came out ahead, assuming that they actually had a race, which is disappointing, right? We have an actual Republican potentially being our next city attorney, and then of the Dems running against each other, the business Dem won every time they had a chance. But those results are still going to change, right? We saw a very small shift today after the 4 o'clock ballots dropped, and that was just 4% of the vote. We still have about 20% of the vote to count, like of 50% of expected ballots. So things could shift. Lorena Gonzalez probably is the furthest to overcome, the furthest deficit there. But the city attorney's race could potentially shift. City Council Position 9 could potentially shift. We did see in the Port of Seattle races, Toshiko came ahead today. So she was behind by a few votes on election night, and now she's winning. Hamdi is still behind, Hamdi Mohammed, but it looks like she'll probably win too. So as late votes just kind of come in and the mail delivers them to us, we'll see a leftward uptick. But who knows which races that'll be enough for, which ones it will not.
Mm-hmm. So was it a good night or a bad night for the LGBTQ plus community?
I mean, we're a pretty big community, so I'm not going to be able to answer everything. I think it's a bad night for Seattle. The main issue that really was the central motivating factor in the race was homelessness and criminality and criminalizing homelessness. And the candidates that seem to be winning right now are the ones who are going to give our homeless population the hardest time and not solve the problem. So congratulations, Bruce. 4 years from now, people will be thanking you for not solving homelessness, right? Like, we're going to chase people from park to park, and we're going to, not ask our richest residents to help out. And 4 years from now, we'll still have a pretty big homeless population. And so that's a bummer. And as the homeless population is disproportionately gay because a lot of gay people are chased out of their homes for one reason or another. Either their parents are not accepting, or they're in a domestic violence situation, or they just make less money than, the average straight person. So on that one angle, I think it's going to be bad. I think if you're a well-to-do gay person, you'll probably be fine. I mean, Seattle has been great for the wealthy. It's just not really great for everyone who's not.
Absolutely. Now let's begin talking about the mayor's race. And MK, if you want to answer that question, we'll ask you later. Obviously, Seattle City Council member President Lorena Gonzalez is trailing Bruce Harrell, and unfortunately is, depending on what you think of it, is expected to lose that race. Now, this was the most expensive campaign for Seattle mayor in the last 19 years of available records. Now, to give MK a little more time, I'm going to go ahead and play a video from election night that I, recorded myself.
All right.
And between our campaign and our labor allies, we knocked close to 100,000 doors. So we are used to being the underdog in every which way, and this campaign is certainly no exception. But one thing is clear: we came together, we fought hard, and we said we will unapologetically stand for working families and our right to live, work, and thrive right here in the city of Seattle. I also want to thank our labor partners from SEIU 775, 6, 925, 1199, UFCW, Unite Here. These labor unions represent the best of our essential workers, our heroes over the last year and a half, helping us survive the pandemic. And without their support, without their help, without their counsel, I would not be standing where I am today. So thank you to our brothers, sisters, siblings in the labor movement for believing in me and trusting me to carry your voice every single day in this campaign. And lastly, before we all go back to drinking some beer and dreaming about the number of votes that are still left to be counted in this race, I want to thank my campaign staff, Alex Corin, my campaign manager, Maya Gillette, who works as a campaign associate, Catherine Bobman, Jay, Fiona, Heather Weiner, so many tremendous people who have shown up every single day to work on this campaign. And Vanya Adazme, somewhere around here, is my field director. We are so proud of this campaign, and every day we fought hard for each other and for a better Seattle, and that work begins. It just begins. We will not stop until we have the Seattle that we all deserve. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
So it's funny because in that video, I'm right behind her husband. You can see me drinking red wine, clapping. So full disclosure, I was at all the good parties last night. They just weren't coming out ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned to me that you were at the party, and unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to see you or say hello. But that happens, right?
Yeah, they're very busy, and there was Nicole Thomas Kennedy and Teresa Mosqueda at a party right across the street, and it was like 5 blocks from my house, so I had to stop by and get a drink. Hopefully, get some of that good energy, and then just chat with some of the people who are really working hard to make the city a better place, even if it doesn't always work out.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you about this race and your thoughts. Clearly, like the mainstream media outlets like King 5 have called this race for Bruce Harrell. What do you think of that? And of course, what kind of mayor do you think Bruce will be for us here in our city?
I hope I'm wrong, but I think Bruce is going to be the third term of the Ed Murray administration, and Durkin was the second term of the Ed Murray administration. If you look at the election night celebration, which I was not at, the people who were there are Tim Burgess, it's Amazon's lobbyist, Guy Palumbo. It's kind of a who's who of the wealthy Seattleites who have been running the mayor's office for the last 8 years, and now they're going to have 12. And so I think we'll see a lot of the same. Right, a lot of fighting with council, a lot of doing the will of big business, and a lot of just not solving the problems that face Seattle. So again, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully Bruce turns this into a football analogy that I don't have, but does a whole lot and surprises me. But I don't know why I would expect that, because we've seen the show before and we're seeing it all over again.
Now, there was a lot of money in this race, and a lot of people are, claiming that, business interests were basically financed Bruce's campaign. As you know, a slate of, progressive candidates to the left have fallen behind in the early results of the election. Is this a repudiation of, the politics of folks on the left, progressives on the left?
I wouldn't say it's a repudiation. I think that, there's a lot of energy and movement that seemed to come out of like the Black Lives Matter protest last year. I think we were hoping to see electoral change, and I think we didn't see that same electoral wins. So even though a lot of activists are really fired up about stopping police violence, about dealing with racism in this country, about housing our neighbors, these are things that really got people motivated. We didn't see the candidates who ran on that win. So that may be a challenge of trying to turn, real grassroots energy into actual votes. And then it's hard. Like last time Bruce Harrell ran for mayor, he got like 13% of the vote. Once you end up getting the chamber support, you have $1 million behind you, and you can do a whole lot. Elections cost too much. The federal Supreme Court's done a lot of damage to any local attempt to try to take that money out. Democracy vouchers. This is actually the first time democracy vouchers were available in the mayor's race. I, again, wouldn't say they were successful because the lefty candidate didn't win, but both candidates were taking them, and that's actually pretty huge. If we had managed to only use democracy vouchers and kept out all the PAC spending, the Political Action Committee spending, I think, one, we would have seen different results potentially, and two, we would have trusted them because it would have been local residents saying, these are the candidates I care about, I'm quite excited about them, and we would have donated directly. Whereas we both had the public financing system, which is quite great, and I'm a big fan of it. But then alongside it, we have all this private sector spending, and it's pretty obvious what's going on, right? Like the wealthy in the city have been asked, and actually literally were asked by Lorena Gonzalez as a council member to pay some of their wealth into the city's public revenues, to house people, to create home housing and house the homeless, and to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And their response when asked to pay their fair share was to fund her opponent and try to kick her out of office. And it may have worked, and that's depressing, right? Like, what's the next mayor going to think if they think, well, there's a public problem to address, it's going to cost money to solve, but if I tax Amazon, they're going to run a candidate against me. Like, it's a scary message to hear if you're in office and you're worried about that. And actually, 3-4 weeks from now, we're going to have a recall election against Shama Sawant, and that's more of the same, right? People who didn't like her kind of lefty politics are spending a lot of money to force a recall, and we shouldn't have a system where whoever's the wealthiest just gets to control our political system. That's not democracy. That's like oligarchy, right? It's bad.
Now, I know that MK, let me try and bring him in again. Yeah, there's definitely an issue with his feed. Go ahead and drop off and drop back in if you would, MK. But I will mention, because I know
I guess
MK would
while
want.
we're still here, it is funny. We just elect an ex-CenturyLink attorney as our next mayor. So my solution would be a public option, but also maybe we can have him improve our CenturyLink lines, because it seems like we're not we're not able to connect, and this is the thing we need to do, right?
I know that MK would want me to mention that the United Seattle Magazine did endorse several candidates in this election, including Bruce Harrell. Um, so let me move on to the city attorney race. Obviously, that was quite, a thing to watch, especially if you're like into politics like we are. Ann Davidson obviously is an attorney and an arbitrator. She ran against Nicole Thomas Kennedy, who was a public defender and is now in private practice. Whoever wins this race obviously will be the first woman to hold the position since its founding in 1875. Now, what do you make of this race? Obviously, Nicole Thomas Kennedy is trailing behind at this point.
And strangely, Nicole's doing better than Councilmember Lorena Gonzalez is. So I still think it's going to be a large gap to make up. It's unlikely to really switch over the next few days, but she's got a better shot than Councilmember Gonzalez, which is also kind of surprising. It's a weird race. I think we were in the race. The race was in the New York Times a few days ago, just talking about how lefty Seattle was either going to elect a Republican or somebody who swore a lot on Twitter, and that was a hard choice for people. I was less concerned about the profanity, but Nicole was clearly not like a political candidate. I don't think she really thought that she was going to win the primary. I didn't think she was going to make it through the primary. I think that Pete Holmes kind of didn't do nearly enough during the initial leg of the race during the primary, and so it ended up being these kind of two candidates who have very different ideas for the city. And it's looking like we may end up having a citywide Republican elected to office, and that is new for Seattle, right? We've had a lot of conservative Dems for quite a while, but we tend to think that the Republican Party is not representative of Seattle's interests and values, and we'll see if how this clash occurs.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, like Seattle may elect its first Republican to office since 1989, so this could be very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure quite what that says. Let me see if MK can speak. MK, can you try and talk? Okay, well, we got, at least it's not, scrolling. At least we got some kind of icon to look at. Excellent. Okay, well, I'll bring you back in, MK, in a minute.
All right.
So what do you make of this race?
I mean, this is, again, very far apart visions for the city. And this is the third time running. She ran for a position 9 on the city council 2 years ago, then statewide for lieutenant governor, and then now for city attorney. It's hard to see what motivates her in the same way that like what motivates Nicole is not hard to see. It seems like Anne is just ambitious and would like to work in local politics. But a lot of what her campaign ended up shaping up around was cracking down on homeless people. And by cracking down, I mean punishing people for not being able to afford a home. The Seattle is brutally unaffordable, and also we're one of the few cities in the entire county and the entire state that don't arrest people for the crime of being poor. And if we begin doing that, I guess our jails will be more full. Homelessness isn't solved if you're in jail for a month. If anything, it makes it worse, because then when you come out, you don't have a house. You've lost your rental if you had a rental. You've lost your job if you had a job. You've lost your car if you had a car, potentially. But people wanted to send a message that they didn't like people being poor and being visible. I don't have a strong thing to say about it, but I do think it's kind of depressing, because it is not a crime to be poor, right? Like we've seen cities across the area, like Mercer Island, enact like camping bans where they like criminalize sleeping outside. No one chooses to sleep outside because they had a good option. You sleep outside when you can't afford anything else. And so what policies we attempt to do, what the courts actually allow us to do. We've actually had a number of cases, both here locally and federally, that say that it's unconstitutional to punish a poor person for not being able to afford housing. So whether that's sleeping, under an awning, or whether that's sleeping in your car, the courts have said you can't punish somebody if they have no way to actually like solve this problem, right? You can criminalize behavior that people are choosing to do, you cannot criminalize the inability to pay for a house. So we may see some challenges in court about whether this kind of draconian, criminalization of poverty is going to be successful. And hopefully, when we find out that it's not successful, we decide to then try new things, because no one wants to be outside. I mean, once again, it's raining heavily. It's cold outside. It would be horrible to be outside right now. And people outside need a house, not a jail cell.
Absolutely.
Oh, you cut out too.
Yeah. Now, I went to Nicole Thomas Kennedy's party because I heard it was at a taco restaurant. It was Taco Tuesday. I love margaritas. So...
They were pretty good margaritas. I was there for a sec too.
Okay. They were good margaritas.
Yeah, they had a nice fight. Taco City in Columbia City. Here's your plug. Send me a free margarita, please. Yeah.
And also the DJ was, he's spinning some mean tunes for sure.
Yeah.
So I did actually interview Nicole Thomas Kennedy. I was the only reporter that night who spoke with her, which is a great honor. But let me go ahead and play that for folks. Okay. So
only you. You're the only reporter I'm talking to.
So I wanted to know, how do you feel tonight on election night?
I mean, I'm hopeful. Yeah. I didn't expect that we would really know anything definitive tonight. That's how it always works with progressives. So, I mean, I'm happy to be done campaigning, and I'm ready to relax for a while and just, let the votes come in, trust the process.
Thank you.
Okay.
Excellent. She's always a fun person. I actually interviewed her for the Seattle Gay News and for Malcontent News. So if you want to check that out, you can always go to sgn.org, or you can go to malcontentnews.com.
Well, and that is a win, because I think nobody else even got a comment. So
definitely, yeah. No, I saw all the press waiting outside in the rain. I was like, I'm going in.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask a question.
Nice.
Now, were there any surprises here in the King County executive race? I know, obviously, Dow Constantine is expected to go into his fourth term now. He appears to be winning against State Senator Joe Wynn of West Seattle.
I didn't see anything surprising there. I think after the primary, Joe came in with, I think, about 30% or so. And so this is just that same pool of voters slightly expanded, but they voted for Dow again. I think Joe ran a good campaign. I think that he really did change the message and the policies that are currently being spoken about at the county executive level. But Dow, is now going to have 16 years in office. So perhaps someday in the future he'll run for governor, and then that position will open up again. But until then, Dow will just will live there.
Okay, so now let me try and bring in NK one more time just to make sure I'm not ignoring him there. MK, can you hear us? Okay. Yeah, MK, you might want to try reconnecting again. I'm sorry. That's the way live video streaming works, folks.
Yeah, I mean, when we're truly done with this pandemic, we can all be in one giant studio again, and then sit around a table and go. But until then, if we ever get back there.
Yes, if we ever get back there, folks would just get vaccinated.
Yes.
At this point, I admit I'm getting a little frustrated with the folks who won't get vaccinated, to be honest with you. And now we're talking about maybe like it being something like the flu shot, every year, having to get, a booster. It's ridiculous. I should mention that I did get my booster because my day job qualifies me for, a booster shot. So I'm prepared, and I felt confident, going out on election night, that I wasn't going to walk away with something other than a margarita or a hangover. So
it was my first time really being at like a party at a bar since this all began, and it was nice. I really like doing it again, but like it takes some getting used to just to go back to the world and feel comfortable being around people you hadn't seen. But it was good to see people I hadn't seen for 2.5 years now. It was fun. I mean, people at the parties I was at were not celebrating because they were like, this is not particularly the news we wanted to see. But they were all there, and they're people who are really motivated to make the city a better place, and that's good energy to be around, even when you lose.
I love election night. It reminded me of when I was, a contributing writer, a staff writer at the Seattle Gay News, and when I became managing editor, going to all the different parties on election night. For those the folks that don't know, I took about a 10-year break from 2010 to 2020, and then came back to journalism. So
You
it
can
was
never
just
leave.
exactly. Once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist. You ask annoying questions. You probe and clarify. You look into things. You investigate. That's what we do. It's in our
Mhm.
blood. I can tell that's the truth for you, Devin.
Yeah, yeah.
I've seen some of your work, and it's pretty impressive. You haven't lost any of your skills. Oh, by the way, when is your article coming out in the Georgetown Tech
Oh, I
Law
have no
Review?
clue. They're on their own schedule. So much work in like the legal community is done by law students who are also overwhelmed. So I think they're editing the footnotes again. But I'm looking forward to it. And then actually, not to take this off the main discussion, but Facebook announced that they're going to delete people's facial recognition profiles, which is a lot of the stuff we were trying to work on, which is that in general, like having all our faces immediately recognizable and scannable is not a good, it's not good for the world. It's just net negative. So for Facebook, for Meta, to decide that is a positive step. Of course, a lot of other companies also have our biometric information, so it's not the end of it. But for one of the biggest players in that realm to say they're not going to do it, they're going to delete it. That's a big deal.
That is a big deal, certainly.
Yeah.
I would look forward to that because that's something I do worry about, privacy. Um, so I wanted to talk about the King County Third District race. I know that's not something that most folks, talk about, but
Mm.
it was a big deal this year because Kathy Lambert, who's held the position for like 20 years, um, looks like she might be losing out to challenger Sarah Perry.
Yeah.
As you know,
I think she's
as
lost it.
Lambert has been a longtime foe of the LGBTQ plus community, as well as folks, who are for progressive causes. He's definitely a conservative on the council. Um, and so, what do you want to say about that race?
Bye. Yeah. She's been in office forever, and I've never found much to endear me to her policies or personality. I think she's had a kind of long history of opposing LGBTQ rights. She's generally opposed like tenants' rights and renters' rights. She's showed herself to be relatively racially insensitive, if not outright racist. She would say that she donates to people who are in Africa, and therefore she can't be called racist. But that's probably not a thing that non-racist people would say. So I'm glad that the district is finally getting rid of her. She's been there for a long time, but the people who are living in the King County area are moving and changing, or being priced out of cities, were coming here for jobs. And I think she's no longer in step with the people she would have been representing. And so I think it's pretty exciting that Sarah Perry will be the new King County Council representative. And then on the council, that means we're going to have even more Democrats. So, when you only have, I think we were 5-4 split before this, that means you can only do what those 5 Democrats agree with. If you have 6, you can do what 5 Democrats agree with, and you can ignore one. So there's just a lot more potential policymaking we might see at the county level. Dave Updegrove also re-won his election. So that's another great champion for LGBTQ rights. He actually, not to bring it back to facial recognition, but he helped work on a facial recognition ban while there. I hope the county does some more stuff in that realm and tries to ban the use of our biometric information in at least public areas. But I'm excited. I think the county is going to be where a lot of good policy comes from, and that's cool, right? That's what we need. There's a lot of problems facing the city and the county, and now maybe the county can do some of that work.
I'm going to let MK go. Thank you so much, MK, for joining us. We'll have you back on the program to discuss another issue. I actually am doing another assignment for United Seattle Magazine. I'll be interviewing former Governor Christine Gregoire later this month. I don't want to ruin the surprise, but she will be featured on the cover. I'm just not going to give you all the goodies. You'll have to check that out. I'll promote that on my social media. Look at my link tree down below, and you can definitely eventually see that article. I did want to talk about the District 9 race. As you know, Nikita Oliver, who's been a long-time activist for racial justice, she's an attorney. She also is the executive director of a nonprofit. She was very popular among, the left wing of the progressives. And unfortunately, it looks like she's trailing to Sarah Nelson, who is the co-founder of Fremont Brewing and a former aide to Seattle City Council member Peter Steinbrück. Oh, Richard Conlon.
Richard
Richard
Conlon.
Conlon.
Yeah.
Richard Conlon. My bad.
Yeah, I mean, everything is local, but yeah, Richard Conlon is the person that was replaced by Sawant because he opposed sick leave. And I think we'll probably see more policies in that general realm now if Sarah does make it through. Nikita's closer than Lorena is, so if someone does pass it over, Nikita may be the one to catch up. They were at, I mean, we haven't seen a big shift yet because we've only had 1 day's updates, but they are at 39%, almost 40%. So it'd be a 20-point shift. That's more than we tend to see in Seattle, but they are closer than Lorena Gonzalez. So if the left is ascendant, we'll see it in the position 9 race and the city attorney's race before we see it in the mayor's race. And I think they've ran just an amazing campaign. I was saying they're doing mutual aid even up to the election night parties. So they're offering free haircuts for people and otherwise like building community and trying to represent the needs of community, up to that final moment and will beyond, I'm sure.
I forgot to mention with the third district race in the King County Council, the Seattle Gay News ran a really great article, very thorough, about Kathy Lambert and her history. Very troubling history of being, anti-LGBT, pretty much anything progressive. So I don't know if Borfos can find that. I'll give him a minute to look for that. It's at sgn.org.
I have it up in my history too. I can stick it in the chat if it will get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's hard because there's just been a train of either missteps or just bad personalities coming out of Kathy Lambert. But she also defended Joe Fain when he was accused of incredibly raping a woman who involved in local politics, and not only defended him, but then both said some really regressive stuff about gender and gender roles and sexual assault. So I don't need to rephrase them here, but I will be happy when she's no longer given a microphone because she's not particularly good at at addressing these issues.
And yeah, discrimination deep dive exposing Councilmember Lambert's hateful history. Who wrote that article? Oh yeah, Hannah Sanders. Hannah is one of my favorite, one of the favorite journalists, contributing writers over at the SGN. So I had a chance to read through it. It's very well written, very well documented. Former city council member Tom Rasmussen is quoted in it. So it's definitely worth a read. So definitely check it out. Thank you, Borfos. For those of you who don't know, Borfos is my Twitch mod. He's fantastic. I do see MK showed up as a different screen. It looks like the same one. Nothing there. Okay. Just double checking. I don't want to leave you out. Now, basically, we talked about the major races. Is there anything else that you were watching, this election?
I mean, the only other race in Seattle is that Teresa Mosqueda was sailing the victory. I think we were all surprised that it was as close as it was, and even then it was not particularly close. And then as we get, the remaining of the votes counted, I think she'll have a pretty substantial lead over the guy who's running on opening the West Seattle Bridge. So that's at least, for the people who are concerned about, the left in the city, that's some success for our lefty candidates because Teresa's still doing fine and will be there for 4 more years. And so I'm excited to see what she does with the new arrangement on the council and the mayor's office.
Yes. Now, trying to I'm having one of those senior moments. The Seattle Pride Executive Director, she was running
Crystal Marks.
Crystal Marks, thank you. She was running for re-election in Burien for the city council race. So it'd be interesting to take a look at that. Probably more important. And then also, obviously, Dave Updegrove, who's a King County Council member. He also, represents a suburban district And so those are two LGBTQ individuals that, I personally am watching. Um,
Well, and it looks like Crystal may have lost her race. Again, we haven't seen all the ballots, and I don't know quite as well how it's Burien, right? Don't let me forget this too.
yeah,
But I'm not
Burien.
sure how ballots change over the period of a week in Burien, if it's similar to what happens here in Seattle. But she is currently behind, and then Dave Upthegrove won his race, so he's doing pretty well.
Excellent. Yeah, I think, just like in Seattle, there was a campaign being waged against Crystal Marks that was definitely fear-based. Look at, DESC, a homeless service provider, opening a new facility in our community. Look at sort of the gun violence that's happening in our community. Look at the, you know, um, minor car theft, catalytic converters and stuff, in the Burien community.
It's hard
And
because this is the same thing we saw. I mean, even in 2020 and 2019 from Trump, right? Like the right wing in this country has figured out a way to vilify the other, and when they're not doing it against migrants, although there's some anti Latino bias stuff going on in Auburn too, they do it against homeless people. And so I think the same basic ads that we saw here, we saw Trump running in 2019, 2020. We're seeing candidates do here. And it's just really unfortunate because we're doing a lot of talking about homeless people and not a lot of talking to homeless people. And it hurts to think that you would be used as an attack ad against somebody who is not responsible for homelessness, and if they are, they're trying to solve it. And so I'm not getting all the Burien targeted mailers, but I'm not surprised that the same attack ads they're running here, running there, which is really disingenuous. The homeless people do not threaten our way of life. They may make us feel guilty because we are seeing people living without when we have so much, even if we have what feels like meager resources in other regards. But to vilify people who are some of the most vulnerable people and some of our most vulnerable neighbors just to win a race is despicable. And that's why I'm mad about the results in the Seattle election. And then that's why I'm mad about the results in like these Burien races, because it's bad faith. And I remember when they would run these attacks about gay people, right? Like the 2004 presidential election was entirely based on the idea that gay people were going to ruin your life and rape your kids and destroy your heterosexual marriage. And when we were the vilified other, it sucked. It hurt. And to now see that, cool, I guess we're great. Everyone loves the gays now. But homeless people are the vilified other. And we're not homeless people, it's Muslims. If not Muslims, it's immigrants. And we just need to stop doing it. And when we see it, we need to call it out and say that it's bigoted, it's hateful, and it's gross. So there's my soapbox, but I'll stay on it because we're going to keep on doing this.
absolutely. Now, Devin, and maybe you could wait backstage. I think at this point we're done. Is there? Let me check the comments for. Let's see any questions. I missed a ton of messages. Oh yes, actually, Lisa Love has a comment for you.
Lisa Love, yes. Oh, Lisa Love. I ran into her at I think a GSBA event at some point, and I kept calling her Miss Love, and she took me aside and said, "You're an adult now. If you call me Miss Love one more time." But yes, huge shout out to Lisa. She helped run our Gay Sphere Alliance in Nathan Hill High School back in the day, and was just a huge just beam of light for a young quasi-closeted queer kid in 1996, right? Like things were different then. Oh, well, hi, Lisa. I'm glad you're here.
I remember when she was just a health teacher and I met her for the first time. I was on a panel of LGBTQ youth talking to students in her health class. And then of course now she's the head of the health the I don't want to misstate it, but it's in the health
She's a big deal. That's what we can say.
It's a big deal. Oh,
Yeah.
and there was a great book that she helped put together with Nate Gowdy, a local photographer. Our Students, Our Voices. Really fantastic, great photographic book with pictures of students, their families, teachers, administrators who were, LGBTQ plus, and it's really fantastic. But I'd have you go backstage. Maybe we'll. That's pretty much it for tonight. Honestly, that's all I got for you, Devin. Because I did want to talk about, unfortunately, another trans murder that happened in our state. Unfortunately, and this is actually the fifth murder in the Pacific Northwest of trans and non-binary individuals. Ricky Adamuro, also known as True Scarlet, um, is just a big personality in Olympia and in Lewis County. She was the um, Miss Gay Lewis County in 2008 and was also the reigning Miss Gay Olympia. She is definitely going to be missed. She was found the victim of brutal homicide in her home in Centralia, Washington. She was 39 years old. Her boyfriend, Christopher Allen Gaudreau, 28, has been charged with murder and is being held at the Lewis County Jail without bail. I want to bring in Oliver Webb, the board chair of Diversity Alliance of Puget Sound, to the show tonight because he has more information and to discuss the relevance and the significance of her death. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. Can you hear me tonight?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
And you can see me. I'm not a weird buffering circle.
Tech issues are the bane of my existence ever since I started Renee Reports.
It wouldn't be a live stream if we didn't have one.
That is true.
Yeah.
So can you tell us more about the situation and how it fits in with the picture, both locally and across the nation?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I am back very shortly after I was here recently talking about Zoe Martinez, and I have some stats for you this time. Like you said, this is the fifth murder in the Pacific Northwest, which is not something we normally have happen. So I looked at the stats for the past 4 years. In 2018, we had one death in Oregon. In 2019, we had an Oregon and a Washington. In last year, we had Summer Taylor during the protests. They were killed, and Diaz Love was injured, severely injured, in horrific. I guess they were hit on, I believe it was I-5. And then this year we've had one in Idaho, two in Oregon, and then now two in Washington. And so both Zoe and Ricky are very close together. And so our Washington's been hit very, very quickly by these two deaths. Both were arrested. But when it comes down to it, we're continually losing members of our community, whether they're in the Pacific Northwest, whether they're somewhere else in the U.S., where they're somewhere else in the world. That really doesn't matter. This is unacceptable. So we aren't part of the census. Most people know this. But the last time there was any sort of numbers done about out trans people, and again, we know that not everybody is out, and that's absolutely valid. Either they're not out because of safety, or they're not out because of family, or they're just not, ready to be out. In 2016, there was a number about 1.3 million trans or gender diverse individuals, and we know that's probably a likely bigger number now, because that was a different time in 2016. So that makes for about 1 in every 28,600 people is trans or gender diverse was murdered, if you take the 45 from that, which looks like a much bigger number when you break it down, right? So you may think 45 isn't a very big number. No, if you take that with the number of out people, we're losing 1 in every 28,000 people. So if you take that down again, 28,600 is almost identical to the number of the population of Maple Valley. Maple Valley right now sits at 28,013, which is where Zoe was from. It's also close to this number of SeaTac, which is a little higher than 28,600. So it's an entire city. So we're pulling from a city. So it's one person, we're losing people from a city, from one of these tiny cities. So it is a big number. It's a huge number to our community. And again, when we talk about these numbers, 45 are just the people that were named, that these families, these friends, these communities fought to make sure were buried under their names. These are the people that we know were trans or non-binary, that we know their names. These are the people that were found, that were gendered correctly at the time of their death. There are likely hundreds, if not thousands more. So Ricky was found. It's a horrific, horrific death. It was her partner. We believe that they had broken up. It is a horrific situation. She had a son. The son was there. I'm not going to go into details. It is unfortunately all over the news as to what happened. It is a very small town. It's a very small county. This woman was an activist, was very involved in our community. Like you said, she is, was Miss Gay Lewis County, Miss Gay Olympia. She was known in our community. And this has hurt the community greatly. They knew this guy. They knew her family. And we're continuing to lose these people. And so I looked at some more stats. So this year alone, we've had at least 250 anti-LGBTQ bills this year. And within that, the trans bills alone, there are 60 that remove kids from sports, 35 that remove gender affirming care, 43 that allow your religion to take away services from us, and 15 that prohibit us from using the bathroom or locker room that identify with our gender. And that is astonishing, the amount of numbers that come out of that. And this is not under the Trump administration. Under the Trump administration, there were hundreds. From day one, Trump started making these bills and putting these bills into action. So it is a direct correlation of the hate that was seeded under that administration that has continued on under this administration, because it was allowed to fester for years and years and years. And it has been allowed to continue. We are not seen as human beings. We do not have rights. And when we are given rights, individual states take it upon themselves to take those away. They take them away from our kids. They take them away from the adults. And they lash out on us until they dehumanize us. And in turn, the people around us that have that deep-seated hatred take it out on us, and we lose more and more people. In 2016, there was a documentary that came out of Washington because there were a ton of bills that were again passed in Washington, were trying to be passed. None of them were passed. A bunch of bathroom bills. That was the year where all those bathroom bills came out originally. In Washington, in our state, they pushed. There were a bunch of families and stuff that pushed and went to the state to fight against them. And it was called The Most Dangerous Year. And I think we lost 23 people that year. We are at 45 already. Every single year since The Most Dangerous Year, it has continued to grow and grow and grow. We do not ever have less than the year before us. We are now the worst year for LGBTQ people. It has been officially deemed that by the HRC. We are under attack. We are continually under attack. It is unacceptable what is happening to us. It is direct correlation. The attacks that happen to us end in violence against us, end in dead bodies. We are burying our own because of what this country has done to us, and it is unacceptable.
Agreed. I looked into this story because I was asked to write an article for the Seattle Gay News. I read through, the court filings, um, and I spoke with family and friends, um, and all of them are devastated. Obviously, she was a light in their life. She was a significant member of the community in Centralia and Olympia. I think about Zoe Martinez, and she was 20 years old. Just how young she was when she died. In this case, the victim was 39. Both were Latina, so there was a lot of similarities in that regard. Although, um, oh, and then both, this is a gory detail, were shot 5 times. Now, this is just 2 of 5 people that had died here in the Pacific Northwest. And I wanted to take a minute to recognize the other individuals we haven't mentioned. I know you spoke about the numbers, but we lost Ollie Taylor of Oregon, 17 years old, number 28 as far as the number of trans and non-binary murders in the nation. Jesse Hart of Oregon was 42 years old. They were number 43. And of course, in Idaho, Joe Aker, who's 26 years old. They were 44. People who want to read about this can read about it in the Seattle Gay News. I'll have an article out there at sgn.org and in the pages of the Seattle Gay News. Let's see. Looks like Borfos found some resources. So definitely check that out. As you mentioned, basically just the Pacific Northwest represents 11.1% of the total murders of transgender and non-binary individuals that we know of. As you
That's
mentioned,
Washington. We're 11.11 for Washington alone.
oh my,
Mm-hmm.
like I know as a transgender person, and I'm sure you know as well, there's a lot of people who had been, taught, that there is male and female. They were not, given the gift of understanding the spectrum that is gender, and respecting people who fall somewhere else on the spectrum. And, to have another death of someone here in our state, this was very difficult for me, to even comprehend. you know, um, I just, I shed a good tear, especially as I interviewed individuals that knew, um, Autumn and knew True Starlet. I tried my best to remain professional, but we had a lot of good cries together. And I really just don't want to cry anymore this year. We have, basically a month, almost 2 months left in this year. And it pains me, to think that anyone else, not only here in Seattle or Washington or in the Pacific Northwest, but anyone else in this country will die through violent means, in part, perhaps because they were, transgender or non-binary. I'm going to hand it over to you for a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's horrific, and I mean, for us to have one person per year basically is outrageous, and to have 2 back to back is unfathomable. So Zoe's murderer's trial starts next month, and we're still going through that, and to have another murder and to have to go through that trial, we have not healed from the last wounds, and these families And this community is not ready for another one. This country is not ready to move forward and continue this. This community is not ready for this. To continue these numbers, to continue these climbs. You know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Everybody is hurting. I was talking to someone today and I was like, you know, we're all in a pandemic. People have, you know, housing instability, food instability, you know, employment instability. You know, there's mental health crises happening. Suicidality is happening. And on top of that, those of us who are in these oppressed groups are having to deal with this, and it's compounded. And we are going through, you know, Trans Awareness Month, and, you know, it is compounded with TDOR, and we are having to mourn our lost. And it's unfathomable what's happening. It is, there's so much. And how do we reconcile that? I don't have answers as someone who leads people, who runs a board and serves the community. When people ask how to navigate this, it's very difficult to give support, because I also need support at times, right? Like, I'm going to be in that courtroom. I'm going to have to see things that are horrific to see. And, you know, it's hard to talk about these things. I did not expect to be back here having this conversation. You know, weeks, like, has it even been weeks? I do not. It's been like a week. Like, it's been like a week since we had this last conversation. Like,
Yes,
when do we have the next conversation? Can we stop having these conversations? Can they stop
please.
killing us? This is ridiculous.
And will our politicians please stop using us as a political, you know, football, you know, to
Yeah.
gain points among their supporters? We are real people. We have
Yeah.
real lives, you know?
And you were just talking, the two were talking about, so Seattle's turning red. It looks like an election. And I was checking the other cities. It looks like there's a large chunk of us turning red. And that's horrifying. That's absolutely horrifying. And I wonder how much of that has to do with the news in the nation that skewed what happened over the pandemic, what happened over the protests, the framing that went around claiming what was going on here, right? Like, they made us an anarchist jurisdiction. They claimed all this stuff that was happening in Seattle. Like, I'm sorry, I was there. This is not what was happening. And we talk about Nikita Oliver, who is an amazing human being and will absolutely be doing mutual aid forever. That is Nikita Oliver. And so if Nikita loses, that is a huge loss for Seattle. That's so disappointing. And so for any of this to turn red is such a huge loss, right? Like, and I wonder how much of that has to do with the framing that happened around this country. Trump literally spent that small portion of the re-election to cry about Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's such a sad situation that's what you're going to spend your time on, to put all of us in danger, because it's supposed to be a safe city. It's supposed to be queer friendly.
We are running low on time. I wanted to mention that Christopher Allen Gadru, 28, he will have an arraignment tomorrow, the 4th, in Lewis County Superior Court, in case anyone is interested. Now, I know we're about to go over time, but I did want to give you an opportunity, because hopefully you will not be back.
Please, no. I mean, for something else, we can
I
have
mean,
some
right,
sort of
right.
great conversation that has nothing to
Right.
do with this terrible stuff.
Hopefully it won't be anytime soon. Hopefully something positive. But I want to give you an opportunity to plug the Transgender Day of Remembrance, because it has special significance this year here in Washington State.
It does. So, Trans Day of Remembrance is Saturday, November 20th. We are doing a dual Tacoma, Seattle. DAPS, so Diversity Alliance of the Puget Sound, founded TDR Tacoma, I don't know, 2008-ish. Christine Gregoire, who you mentioned earlier, made TDR an official day for Washington State back then. And so we're doing Tacoma at the Washington State Historical Society because it's a large building and we can safely secure it. And then from 6 to 8 p.m. And then Seattle will be doing it at a church. I believe it's a utilitarian church. That is, I will be announcing exactly where. That is ran by Astro Pittman, who is one of our board members as well. They founded it a few years ago and has always been one of the organizers and will continue doing that. They just happen to be under the DAPS umbrella these days. And we will be live streaming and make it sort of a hybrid situation. And then several cities are going to raise the pride flag to half-mast for us in honor of TDR, which is a big deal. We don't believe that any government buildings in Washington State have ever done that at half-mast. And then several cities are going to be proclaiming TDR an official day and Trans Awareness Week. So we will be putting out that information on our socials when we get those days and those times for the proclamations and the flag raises. So yeah, so look out for that
Thank you.
information. There are also several other TDRs happening around the state if you can't make it to either Tacoma or Seattle.
And what was the website again?
Find those. www.diversityallianceofthepugetsound.org. I was like, I have no idea right now. And we're on most or all social media under Diversity Alliance of the Puget Sound.
Absolutely. And again, Trans Day of Remembrance is November 20th this year. I want to thank all my guests for being on the show. I know it's a heavy topic, and I want to thank all the viewers for watching. And that's basically it. Thank you for tuning in to Renee Reports. Until next time, good night.